Welcome to Series 2, Episode 3. In this episode, I talk to Rachel Flower from the BroadRoom. We discuss mindset, what to do with your bounce back loans, women in business, decision making, being proactive, and much more. Let's normalise some of the challenges you and your business is going through. Thanks for being a fab listener, and don't forget to subscribe. Welcome to the Johnny Ross audio experience. I'm Johnny Ross, founder and digital marketing strategist of Fleek Marketing. Each podcast I'll be bringing you an expert to inspire you, to give you some great business growth takeaways, and to get you thinking about marketing and the bigger picture of how businesses can improve, adapt and grow. I look forward to sharing this with you on each podcast, so here we go. Hi and welcome to another live Q&A. Here today we have Rachel Flower with us. Delighted that you can be with us. Thank you for joining us. And we're in the Facebook group, Coronavirus Yorkshire Business Support Group. You're welcome to join anytime. Today we're live streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, my first time on LinkedIn. So welcome to anyone that's watching on LinkedIn and on Facebook in the group. If you go to the top of the group, the pinned post, you should see us live there. If you're watching this on replay, please put hashtag replay so that we can understand how you consume this content. Rachel, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Johnny. Very exciting.
Absolute pleasure. So it would be really good to get a bit of a background. I mean, you're a lawyer, but you are involved in many different companies. Got lots of different passions. Talk to us about how you've got where you are now.
Indeed. Where am I now? Where am I going? Yeah. I think it was Marie Forleo who coined the phrase about being multi-talented, multi-passionate in the entrepreneurial world. And I think that's quite a common theme for many of us. I did actually start out as a lawyer. I trained with a large law firm called Adelshaw Goddard, and then I moved to DLA Piper. And then I actually went in-house, which is something that lawyers commonly do. And I loved being in-house because it gave me that much wider, broader commercial business angle to things. I had a commercial director role and had a team and managed a whole load of clients. And it was in 2009, I was starting a family, and the issue I had, the core issue was that I just couldn't see how in this senior role I would transfer that into being this mother that I wanted to be. I didn't know what that would look like. And to be honest, I had very few role models who could show me how to balance being in a senior corporate position with being at home. And so I set up in business and started out on sort of a consultancy basis. And then I grew Cerenwood, which is a legal consultancy business at its core. And initially was sort of trying to bring fairly disruptive in a way, but commercial advice rather than legal advice. So really helping business owners to think about the legal aspects, but apply them in a very commercial way to their business. And I also wanted to provide different ways of working for lawyers, particularly women. We lose a lot of women out of the law profession because there's very little flexibility in terms of how the role works. So yeah, I did that for a long time and working around my young family. And then, as you say, I've branched out over the years into business coaching, business mentoring. I now have a venture with my business partner Lucy called the BroadRoom, which is peer-to-peer problem solving. And I have a number of interests in businesses where I am sort of in a commercial director role, if you like, but also have a shareholding and help to promote the success of those businesses. So very varied.
It's brilliant. And we're going to be trying to open up the conversation today and sort of have an honest conversation about trying to really get to the bottom of how people are feeling, what people are going through, to try and normalize some of this as well. I know you're very passionate about women in business as well. So there's a lot of different topics that we're going to try and cover. And as I said, one of the things is just trying to have that conversation around trying to really tease out the things that people are really going through right now, and to help them understand that they're not the only ones going through this. And you know, the last 7 or 8 weeks, I think we're in week 8, I think. How's it been for you personally? You've got children at home. It's tough, I assume.
Yeah, I've got two girls, 7 and 10-year-old, and obviously the schools closing was a big thing for me as a business owner. It was for many of us because suddenly we had that extra responsibility, and I welcome it. And my priority initially was to take care of my children. I was concerned for their emotional well-being and, you know, the messaging, I guess, around the virus. I think many of us as parents wanted to make sure that we limited impacts on mental health. I didn't want my children to grow up with this sudden new fear around infectious disease. So we're in uncharted territory, weren't we? And I had lots of immediate things to sort out in my own business around, you know, contracts that were cancelling or, you know, issues that my clients were having that I needed to take care of. But then I also had this massive influx of pretty much hundreds of business owners that needed immediate support around things like terminating contracts, furloughing employee. Well, furlough was a new term to us, wasn't it? But redundancy schemes. Their customers were cancelling, and you know, in whole industries, sectors of industries being forcibly closed down. There was very much this aftermath of panic, and that was, you know, you and I talked briefly about a training that I rolled out on the change curve theory. Essentially, as a nation and also globally, we went through this chaotic aftermath. And lucky for me personally, which is the question that you raised, I've had experience in my life of kind of quite serious life trauma and been through some bereavements, and my youngest daughter had a cancer diagnosis. So I was already familiar with what happens to human beings when we suffer quite extreme shock action. And actually the pandemic has been traumatic. So I guess I had this kind of advantage that I had these tools around emotional resilience that I could use on myself and my family, but also help my clients with. So whilst there've been lots of dark days and there's been many difficult days, I've also feel I've been able to, you know, employ a lot of resilience in the last 6 to 8 weeks and help a lot of people as well.
Yeah, well, and it is tough, as you say. So one of the things that you talked about is the program, the training, and that's around mindsets. Is it? Is that right? It's around having the right mindset. Is that the training that you were talking about, the curve, or was that to do with? Just talk to me about the curve that you were mentioning just then.
It's a concept called the change curve, and it is based on, there's a whole body of work by a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who talks about the grief curve. So the emotions that somebody goes through in the aftermath of having lost a loved one, and things like shock, denial, obviously deep grief, it can lead, and eventually you move more into acceptance and you create a new normal. So you'll have heard this phrase new normal being coined, and the new normal is difficult. You know, even if you're going through a grief experience on your own, it's hard. You move into this new phase of being where you accept that life will never be as it was before. But you start to embrace and see joy and hope in other things. And so the change curve theory kind of builds on that because it talks about it more in a leadership context. So even in the normal course of things, a business might be constantly managing its workforce through a change curve because it has things that impacts the business and it needs to bring people on a journey and it helps people to interact properly. And most important aspect really about is recognizing that people are at different places on the curve at different times. So you can have people that have moved through the chaos bit and are now into acceptance and becoming more invigorated and creating ideas on how to move to a new normal, while other people are still in shock and denial and pain and chaos. And that helps you to meet each other where you are and be more empathetic. And I think it's been so fascinating during the pandemic because we have seen that. I'm sure you can think of lots of examples. It's led to conflict and divide, particularly on social media, because some people are feeling more positive while somebody else is still in panic mode and they come up against each other.
So this is really important then when you're trying to sell and market, to really understand where your clients, but also your existing clients and potential clients, so but two different sets there, are on that curve. It's really important you understand that.
Yeah. And I think where you and I started having an early dialogue was about a message that I was pushing out. It particularly affected women in business. I was getting asked over and over again, is it okay for me to be marketing? Perhaps it's insensitive. Am I okay to keep selling? And how do I reposition myself because I don't want to look mercenary or like I'm exploiting the situation? And yeah, it created a lot of divide, and particularly around personality types. Some people wanted or immediately bounced straight into action and saw gaps and were able to position themselves well. And sometimes they did that really well and they were sensitive, but other people did that and got it wrong and got criticized for it. And then different personality types tended to want to sit back, and they might not have known they were in the change curve, but they were trying to go introspective and reflect and really do that deep thinking that you just alluded to. What does my customer need right now? What do I need? What does my family need? What does my marketing need to do to really not just be short term, but to get me through with a longer term perspective? So we saw some companies go completely dark and not really communicate at all for a while.
Yeah. How do you have any practical tips at all on how to understand where people are on the curve? So whether that be existing clients or potential clients, what I understand the deep thinking. Is it deep listening? What's the
yeah. So I think, as you say, like some of these things are actually really great lessons for us as business owners. I think so many lessons are going to come out of the pandemic. You and I have talked about this. As a business owner, you should always know your client really well, and you should always be doing market research, always be talking to your customer, constantly doing customer satisfaction surveys or feedback loops, and really concentrating on how you retain your customers, give them that 5-star experience, wow them, all the good stuff. Actually, in the normal course of things, it's really hard, especially for small businesses, to cover all those bases. So what we saw in the wake of the pandemic was people at different places with how they could move their marketing and their messaging forward quickly enough to re-engage in the customer if that was necessary, or to retain the customer if they already had good retention rates, or actually to find completely different customers, because some businesses literally lost everybody overnight. And they had to maybe start again with the same customer base, or they had to pivot. We've talked a lot about pivot and introduce new products, completely new offerings at speed. So, top tips. We could get generic with it, but really it was about being individual as a business owner. It was really about understanding your unique business, your position within your industry, and looking at what worked before and could still carry on working, and what had suddenly stopped working and needed to be, in some cases, quite drastically changed.
Well, one of the clients or customers that you talk about is what you call solopreneurs. So that's typically one man or one woman bands. Being an entrepreneur, is that something that you can learn, or does it not necessarily come naturally, or do we have to realize that people aren't just in business to be entrepreneurs?
Oh, I love that question. It's a brilliant question. Or you could talk about that all day. So the word entrepreneur comes from the French, and it means an adventurer or explorer. So as a concept, I think it's important when we're talking about truly entrepreneurial people that it's meant to be somebody that is visionary and strategic and is coming up with new ideas, and they are innovating all the time. And true entrepreneurs, I guess, if we were going to be purists about it, are growing fast growth companies, and they're trying to spin them off and sell them on, and they've got a very strategic view on things. True entrepreneurs probably would also have their fingers in lots of different pies, and would be hedging their bets, if you like. That's a sensible financial thing to do. So if one company goes down, I think they say you should really have 7 sources of revenue at any given time as a true entrepreneur. So, yeah, a lot of people that I've worked with over the years are also uncomfortable because being called an entrepreneur because of those sort of connotations. And I think we have to say, like, it's absolutely fine to be a business owner and not necessarily want to aspire to all of those things. And the solopreneur market is a really good example of that. Plenty of people are business owners, and actually they're quite happy running a sustainable, successful business without necessarily an aspiration to grow that, scale that, sell it over time. It's literally good enough, like, to look after your family and impact a cause you care about and be in the community, like helping people. So those solopreneurs, I think, have been hit particularly hard in the wake of the pandemic. You know that this is something I feel passionately about. I've been campaigning, and there is limited income support for sole directors of companies, and there's gaps in the government legislation around self-employed and solopreneurs, small business owners who've fallen through the cracks of some of the income support that's been available. And that's been quite a horrific downside of the pandemic. We have to realise that they're a massive proportion of society as well. They deserve to be cared for.
So as a true entrepreneur, I guess you have some of those, as you say, you've got fingers in different pies anyway. You've got some resilience. You've potentially gone through things already. As someone who's just wanting to feed their family, be in a business because that's potentially what their accountant has told them is the best way to have a structure. Thank you. I guess they're in a position where some of them actually just don't know what to do. And is that what you're hearing from many, I assume?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's been heartbreaking for me. I mean, I've worked more consistently over the years with the growing businesses from a commercial legal perspective, but I've also worked a lot, as you know, with women in business, and they do tend to be solopreneurs. I think the stat says that 70% of women owning businesses, when they're surveyed, don't want to grow their business. They just want that sustainable income. Wow. And there's lots of reasons for that, which we could debate, but most of it is generally childcare related, because they don't want the stress of at that point in time being on it can be very hard work and time intensive to genuinely grow and scale a company. So yeah, there's that big pool of people that when the proverbial has hit the fan, they haven't necessarily got that trained entrepreneurial muscle to bounce back and start looking around and redirecting and resiliently responding. They've been used to running a fairly, it's never easy running a business, but predictable in a way. As a solopreneur or a small business owner, once you've got a number of clients locked on, then you tend to start to get an element of sustainability. But if you lose all those clients overnight and your business has been forcibly closed, or your product or your service is no longer in demand, or people were making obviously fiscal decisions, just people have been closing down certain fields of spend which they were not essential. So many small businesses have just been hit by that. Like, the business might come back as people start spending again, so their businesses aren't dead in the water, but for the short term, they've had a kind of, where do I go now, like rabbit in the headlights response.
Yeah. Just to remind you, people that are watching, you're welcome to ask questions anytime. If you're watching this back, please put #replay. And if you want to join us and continue this debate, or have questions, or want some support, then I'll give you contact details on how to get to Rachel at the end of this. But we also have a Facebook group, the Coronavirus Yorkshire Business Support Group. You're welcome to go in there and self-help network and join the conversation. What I want to know is, you've got your fingers in many different pies. You've got lots of stuff going on. You've got, you're trying to manage the household and the children, and your husband's got a full-time job as well. In fact, you're also a member of the White Rosettes, and I think you like doing some theatre stuff as well. What do you put all your success down to? How have you managed to achieve this?
That's a lovely question. I think it's always this outward looking in, isn't it? We can look at other people and think like they're doing amazing things and they got all this going on. And I think social media can be quite bad for that, because we tend to put out then this this image of like all the wonderful things we're doing, but we don't tend to necessarily talk about all the crap that goes on behind the scenes. So yeah, I'm doing lots of wonderful things in the world, and I'm really proud of myself for that. But equally, there's been loads of days where I've been crying into my gin and tonic in the garden, and like I go into I've got a little peer group mastermind of women that support me, and you know, we've had lots of conversation, and this is really hard. I don't feel like I'm keeping all the balls in the air, or I've dropped some plates and they've smashed on the floor, like literally in the kitchen, and you know, in the business sense, you know. And one of the things I have been trying to do in the last 2 months is talk more about that. So I've shared quite a lot of content that's maybe a bit deep. So about when I've gone through bereavements and trauma in the past, I've made videos, and one of them is called The Gift, talking about, with the benefit of looking back on traumatic events, we can look for what was the good that came out of that. And if you just in the aftermath, it's too hard to do because you can't see any good. But as years have passed, and I lost my parents when I was 20, that was a very difficult thing to go through. I lost my brother in a car accident some years later, all very traumatic events. And I've had to kind of train myself, I guess, I've had lots of help. I've had psychotherapy and not psychiatric in like, you know, but I've had series like his mental health week. So let's talk about that. You know, in my 20s, I suffered with panic attacks and anxiety. I was trying to hold down a very demanding job as a lawyer, and I was basically burning the candle at all ends, and I had to get support and be supported. And so I suppose as you get older and a bit wiser, and you know, you look back on those things and they have contributed to my success, as you refer to it now. I wouldn't choose to have gone through those things, but I did, and I do think they've stood me in good stead to be more resilient at times like this. So I've tried to share content to give people hope and to try and shut down this. I mean, it's a good point that you make. Like sometimes when I stand up as a woman in business and financially secure, and my children are, you know, safe and well looked after, I sometimes get views put to me like, well, it's all right for you, and you wouldn't understand what it's like to be on the breadline, or you wouldn't understand. And so I have to gently say to them, well, actually I would. I grew up in a working class family. You know, we were affected by recession. My parents nearly lost their house. When I was 20, I lost my parents. I had no money. You know, I think we forget when we look at people, we forget that there's always a backstory, and you never really know somebody's backstory until you get to know them. And that's one of the core messages I talk about. You know, we don't judge. We, you know, are compassionate. We are empathetic. Certainly if somebody's being angry or frustrated, for me as a coach, I look for what's behind that. You know, I look for what's the trigger.
You must have a natural drive as well, though, because you know, take the White Rosettes as an example. You've won gold medals. I want to know more about this, by the way. You must have a natural drive as well, I assume. And I want to get onto in a minute around the challenges for women, and some of that's around finance and all the things that you've just mentioned. But correct me if I'm wrong, there must be some natural instinct in here of you for real drive.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's true. I mean, I was born in a working class household. My parents had very little money, and there was always an undercurrent from my parents about going out and being someone in the world, and they wanted the best for us. And for them, that was about being a doctor or a lawyer, because they saw that as, you know, those are vocations. As soon as I became clear that I had a natural intelligence, you know, you're an A-grade student, you want to go in one of those two directions. I actually wanted to be a singer or an actress. I was very into drama, and I agreed to become a lawyer, basically to keep my parents happy. And I had this vision that I would run off and be discovered by the West End at some point, you know, in the future. And my parents died when I was doing my legal training or about to start it. And I suppose I pursued the dream for them for many years. And that's something that happens to a lot of us, you know, childhood conditioning, whatever expectations or societal, you know, that has a big impact on what you go on to do. And I suppose I didn't want to leave that lawyer guise behind for quite a long time, because I felt like that was something that my parents had wanted. And of course, it is a great, you know, career for the right person. The problem for me was it wasn't actually the right job. I'm a good lawyer, but I'm not a brilliant lawyer. I'm not interested necessarily in the technical aspects of the law. What always really interested me was the relationships. So I loved the psychology of, what does that business really need? Who are the decision makers at the table? How are they all interacting? And of course, that naturally plays into things like shareholders and, is the business going to succeed? Investors invest in people. So the dynamic of the people. Anyway, so yeah, that natural drive, I think partly for me comes from not having very much when I was younger, and wanting to, the art of the possible. I think every human is born with an incredible amount of potential, but it really depends on the opportunities that they're given. And equality is a big driver for me, wanting to level playing fields, whether that's in education, whether it's in women in business, like we're talking about, whether it's in finance, and diversity. They do drive me on. Yeah.
So the barriers for women in business, some of the things that you talk about are things around self-belief, self-doubt, lack of mentorship, peer-to-peer, finance, lack of role models. One of the things that you've created is the BroadRoom, which I think is to try and plug some of those gaps. You've also said that the current crisis, with the coronavirus, potentially is sort of throwing us back to the 1950s a bit from a childcare point of view as well. So just talk to me more about that and how the BroadRoom helps, and sort of the things that you're hearing and help us normalize this, help us realize that actually everyone's going through the same shit here.
Yeah, I do want to normalise that, particularly for women, and men, to be fair, because one of the positives that has come out of the pandemic, actually, I made that comment to you about 1950s, but we have seen a lot more men step up and ask for flexibility in their roles and sharing of childcare, more than we might have seen, 10 years ago. I think that has been a positive. But by and large, from the women that I've spoken to, whether that's in their employed roles or whether it's running their own business, the lion's share has automatically fallen onto us. And I think we can be our own worst enemies with that. Most of the women I know, and they're smart, ambitious, intelligent, fierce she lions, they want the best for their children. But we can have this element of martyrhood as well, where we instantly start trying to do all the things, juggling all the plates, turning into superwoman. That's a theme we talk about a lot with mental health with women. We're sort of like the have it all generation. It's all very new, but for one of the first times in history, it is possible, in theory, to have a brilliant career or run your own business and be a great mother and have a partner and keep all your friendships going and have hobbies like I sing and, you have it all. But actually, can you? Because we have a massive increase in the impact of stress, mental health. As you know, I work closely with a company called the Chrysalis Effect that looks or helps people recover from chronic fatigue and ME, diseases that are very closely linked with stress. And they do affect men and women equally, but we're seeing so many women, A-type overachieving women, who are then getting burnt out. And frankly, you're no use to anybody if you are not taking care of your mental health and your physical health. So all those barriers to women in business, there's kind of a balance between having to recognize that, particularly if you've got children, you can't run as fast as other entrepreneurs who are growing and scaling, and being okay with that. And then as a society, making it okay for people to contribute at a modest level. There's too much pressure on women. And I gave you some examples, Johnny, about some of the language that is used to women in business that might be like, oh, it's really lovely that you're running that little business, or, oh, it's great that you can work part-time. And then sometimes these women are doing absolutely amazing things. And I'm not even talking about the revenue, because that's just one metric, right? But these women are often driving social purpose companies. They are down at the grassroots, literally like on their hands and knees in communities, sorting out problems. And they don't get enough credit. And we don't get enough PR and media attention on that. So whenever you ask me a question like that, I'm going to start going off. I could talk about it all day. I'm very passionate about it. And as you say, during the pandemic, that's become much more difficult. Funding, much more difficult.
Which nicely brings me on to a topic I wanted to ask you about around the loans that are available. I know that a lot of us are struggling to, some of us fall through a lot of gaps with regard to grants and there's some of the schemes out there. But one of the things that most of us can do is apply for loans. Typically, traditionally, you would say, I assume you'd say, don't put yourselves in debt. What's the advice that you're giving solopreneurs and businesses around things like the bounce back loans?
Yeah, well, as with everything with the pandemic, it's been an evolving journey. So my advice has had to change over the days and the weeks as they pass. New measures have come out. They keep adding things in, to the pot. And I think actually the way the government has responded, by and large, has been unprecedented and great in many, many areas. So I've seen lots of businesses well supported, different grants have become available, the income support where it's helped people, that's absolutely marvellous. And I think we can all take our hats off to the government for those measures. The debt one is really interesting. Initially, the Cybils loan scheme was not working so well for small businesses at all. It was quite onerous to apply for, and lots of small businesses were knocked back. The bounce back loans came in, a completely different kettle of fish. I'm not really up to date with the statistics anymore, but as of a week ago, I think there was already £3 billion of capital pulled down. They just had a massive amount of applications. So what I've seen is a very mixed bag of applicants, small business owners. Some were in absolutely dire need of literally finance, particularly those that were excluded from the income support. So they've had to make that very difficult decision to pull back a bounce back loan, literally to carry on paying themselves salary, which is legal for the bounce back loan because it's an overhead of the company, and to put food on the table. Right. And then I've seen, because it's open to businesses of all shapes and sizes, I've seen much larger companies going, well, hey, this is the best interest rate we've ever been offered and there's hardly any risk attached to it. So they've taken the loans and they're immediately investing it or accelerating projects, research initiatives that they had. And then somewhere in the middle, there's people that are kind of, well, I'll just get it because, everyone else seems to be getting it and it feels like a good, and they're sticking it in the bank account. And that's okay too. It's not really going to help the economy, but it's an okay thing to do because none of us really know what the months ahead are for our business. Things can carry on changing. So
you just made a really important point around I think there is a concern some people have around being how they can use that money, and of course what we don't want to do is put people in positions where they are in debt that they can't afford, or we're not talking to people that are trying to commit fraud. At the same time, though, there's people that are concerned that they can't take some of this money out as dividend, salary dividend, and the fact of the matter, like you've said, is actually you can, because
take it as your salary. Yeah, that's
you're paying yourself, aren't you?
Yeah.
And if you pay yourself via dividend, then that would be as long as you're not taking the whole lot out to be ruthless with it, but as long as you're paying yourself what you were paying yourself, and you can, I guess you can. As long as you can put yourself in a position that actually things are going to turn around, and you've got a plan. As long as you have some kind of plan, then I think that's what it's all about, and giving yourself that reassurance. So
let me just talk to that for people who may be in that position. So the other good thing that I hope comes out of this, and as I say, I've been in the campaign groups and I've been really doing my best to give my commercial knowledge away for free to help people understand. In the solopreneur and the small business market, we have a lot of people who didn't even really understand the difference between PAYE, salary, and the dividends. They'd acted exactly as you said, on the advice of their accountant, some of them way back when. And then in light of these income support measures, they've actually been literally stung on the bum because, through no fault of their own, really, there's been some very dubious comments made by politicians as well about tax dodging and, well, you haven't paid into this. All of that is actually factually incorrect, and it's been very unfair. Maybe 10 years ago, there was tax advantages that were good from running a limited company, but these days, Very, very small differences between being self-employed and between being employed, actually, and then being a limited business. So part of the good that has come out of this is being able to educate that pool of people. And I've been talking to them about, you're a director, but you're also a shareholder. As a director, you get paid a salary, which is your PAYE. And as a shareholder, you can then take dividends when the company is profitable. Now, for me, I've been running a business for a long time, but I'm on that model. The reason I'm on that model is because I pay my suppliers first. I pay my team first. So the reason I do it is for cash flow, literally. Like if there's a bad month in my business, I don't carry on taking salary as a director. I pay everyone else first. So the advice as well, which has been great to see businesses, I suppose, waking up to this more commercial, forward thinking. Oh, what does that mean? Right. Well, I am going to raise my PAYE salary. And if I get the bounce back loan, instead of paying myself £7,000 a year or whatever they've been advised to do, they're now actually paying themselves 15, 20, 30, whatever they want their salary to be, whatever the business can afford. And they may not pay themselves dividends again. So they're going to think about how to structure their business for the future in the way that's right for the type of business that they run. And that has to be the thing.
That makes a lot of sense. We're sort of jumping into this next question. So assuming that you're not using the bounce back to possibly pay yourself, etc. My question to you is, how should businesses spend their bounce back loan? What if they have got this money and they've just put it in their account just in case, or if they are thinking of possibly investing? Any thoughts on what businesses could be doing right now?
Definitely. I've always got thoughts on topics like that. And just picking up from a coaching perspective, you said, what should business owners do? And I think the really important thing is that there is no should. I mean, I firm believer is there's no should in life anyway. We can do whatever we want. And whenever I'm coaching, I change the should from a could, and I have to remind myself to do that, because particularly as a woman, I tend to put all these obligations that I should be doing X, Y, Z, and actually, do I have to do them all? I could choose to do them. And I think that's a really good way to approach the bounce back loan. Like, there are many things that any of us could do with it if we wanted to. There is no particular reason you should do anything. So I've been encouraging people to look at your business, look at your personal situation, look at your own risk, your appetite for what helps you to sleep at night. And, as with anything, it's like, what have you got to lose versus what have you got to gain? And, from a purely strategic point of view, it's always then looking at the return on investment. So it's actually a really good time to invest in stocks and shares in certain companies. Strictly speaking, a company shouldn't be doing that if, it's using its bounce back loan for that. But if you wanted to personally pay yourself and then reinvest that, then that might be a great thing to do. I've got a really good friend who's a wealth management coach, and that's what her business has gone wild. Like, lots of people who have got a bit of money to spend are wanting to be strategic about it. At the same time, if there's projects in your business that you're looking forward and you're saying, if I do that now, like if I build that thing now, then I'm going to be ready in 3 months. Like, what is the demand that is going to come down the line? And, you and I, Johnny, were also talking about a fascinating topic, which is consumer behavior and how we expect people to be spending in the months to come. What will they be buying? So when I've been talking to people about bounce back loans, I've been really encouraging them to think about what are going to be the most profitable products and services that you can sell and the most in demand in the months to come. Because the last thing you want people to do with a bounce back loan is plow it into things that are not going to be needed. So
you've picked up on the point around consumer behavior. How are we going to work out the demand on our products and services? Have you seen any examples? I've seen a couple, actually. I'm just wondering if you've seen any examples yet of businesses trying to find out or trying to plan on how consumer behavior is going to change. And when we use the word consumer, we are referring to business sales, because they're consumers, they're people. So, and have you any examples of that, or any thoughts on how we can possibly foresee the future with regard to behavior and demand?
Well, I mean, the pandemic is an unprecedented event. We can't get away from that. It's having a global impact as well as a national impact. So it's very unique, actually, to be looking at consumer behaviour in such a broad way. Normally, we see consumer behaviour impacts in pockets, where trends and so I think one of the important things is thinking back to the change curve. What we're definitely going to see in the short term is people continuing to buy with a very survival instinct type approach. People are going to be very cautious, probably, in the short term. Massive, and it's totally human behavioural as well as fiscal. But when we saw the panic buying with the toilet rolls and, essentially strange behaviour, but it's very easily explained when we think about the change curve. And I think that will continue for some time. And people also wanting comfort, so we're seeing quite a lot of nostalgia trends coming back up, and obviously alcohol, which isn't great for health necessarily, but people just want a bit of fun and lightness. Some of those trends are going to be really topical. And then definitely obviously online, anything education led. People are going to be home a lot. Well, even as the lockdown measures are released, we still want that ability to connect and continue to feel part of communities and continue learning when we can't go out and do our usual things.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you said that earlier on, you were talking about how research is really important. And I think one of the things that you could be doing as a business owner right now is going out and asking your existing clients or asking potential clients, actually, the example is the restaurant industry. You've seen some big restaurants that have gone out with surveys trying to understand, are you going to want to come back? How would you want to sit? How would you want to consume? And I think it's around getting some data and asking the question. And in fact, doing that is marketing and is selling. It's just a different way of doing it. Yeah. So I think that picking up on it's really what you said earlier, which is research. So go out and ask the question. I would have thought
research and I suppose risk in a way. I mean, yesterday the butcher delivered a whole load of meat to my door, and they're a local company that would never have delivered to me before because they delivered to the restaurants, right? But they pivoted really quickly. They were like, oh my God, we have absolutely no trade locked in because all the restaurants have closed. What do we do? So they went out to friends, family, community, and now mums like me can get really high quality produce delivered to my door. And the difference from the supermarket stock has been incredible. So I was saying to the guy yesterday, are you going to carry on doing this? Because this has been amazing experience, particularly again as a mum. I don't get to go out to restaurants very often. So having a really high quality cut of meat at a reasonable price, the same as I play in the supermarket, it's been incredible. And I think there's a good example. He said to me, I'd like to think so. We're still deciding. So they've pivoted. They've kept their business going, and now they get to decide. And they're looking at, they will maybe offer pickups, Saturday morning collection slots for family. And he also said to me, which was lovely, we really want to support the people who've supported us. And, they recognising that the mums have basically saved their business by being willing to take a punt, and give that a go. And then it's win-win all around. So I love the fact that some of the established models, I used to work in BT, and it's a very, it's a very big business. And there was sometimes in pockets an ethos of it just doesn't work like that. We've always done it this way. And it's quite hard to move the juggernaut in a big company. And I think it's been incredible overnight in the wake of pandemic, is seeing just all the things that we might have liked to have changed, just gone like that, and people having to innovate. It's amazing.
One of the final topics I want to come on to is around, we talked previously around decision making, planning, 90-day sprints. Talk to me about how you see businesses using that model and how that model works, and what the pros of that type of model are.
Yeah, so in my like sort of legal background, commercial contracts and everything, I did a lot of technology contracts, which in the last 20 years have been changed phenomenally and are having to change all the time. And one of the ways that, particularly in a project management sense and a delivery sense, that new technology is delivered is through agile working. It's called Scrum working. You're familiar with it, and the teams work to very short-term goals, and they work collectively on actions, and then they sort of at the end of a sprint they stop, they reassess, they course correct, and they go forward again. So the principle is very applicable to business, particularly in this climate. So it's always been a good idea, obviously, to have a business plan, but we used to talk a lot more in business about a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan, or maybe an exit plan might be a better way to describe it. More recently, in line with this agile context and how fast the world is changing these days, we live in a very fast-paced changing environment in the Western world. So it's more sensible for business owners to work in shorter planning spurts, and 90 days is a good period for a business to know whether something is working or not, whether that's a product that's due to market and it's got enough time to get feedback, whether it's a marketing strategy or something they're doing on social media. You have to stick with it for long enough to know where it works, but you also have to have a tipping point that says that's not working so well, course correct, do something different. And I think in the pandemic that's come down even smaller in some ways, which can be true and cannot. Rational thinking has been very difficult to arrive at for many business owners because we're in panic mode, and the neuroscience, the way that our brain works when the amygdala's triggered, which it has been for many of us, we struggle to kind of step back. So, we talked a little bit about the BroadRoom. The whole concept of the BroadRoom is based on that when business owners are under stress and they're trying to do their own business plan and say, is it going to work? It's always better to get another set of objective, smart minds to help you see the blind spots, to help you problem solve. Doesn't mean you'll necessarily do anything different some of the time. You might stick to your original plan, but going through the process of being interrogated and quizzed and looking for the holes with a group of smart people is priceless. Because particularly for small business owners, we tend to get siloed and a bit lonely and isolated and blinkered.
So in essence, it's having a large key objective or a couple of key objectives, but then breaking those down to, okay, well, to get to there, what could we do in the next 90 days? Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends obviously on the size of your business, because, a 90-day plan for a large business might have many multiple goals and objectives because they've got more resources to throw against them. In a smaller business, you've got to be really realistic. And one of the things that happens for many small business owners is that we start trying to run off in all these different directions, and there's opportunities, and we say yes to all these things. And then you end up doing not very much well. You're doing everything kind of half-cocked, and that's a real problem. Focus is really important. I'm saying that I'm absolutely been guilty of that in the past. I'm multi-talented, multi-passionate, and I've learned the lesson the hard way, that unless you employ this kind of hedgehog concept, which is from the Jim Collins book, Good to Great, but a company to grow should focus on the thing that it can do brilliantly and do better than anybody else, and really get their head down and deliver that to become a market leader. You probably heard people talking about niching or, that kind. It's all the same thing, really. It's all part of the same conversation.
Brilliant. Listen, you've been absolutely fascinating to listen to, and really helped us normalize a lot of this, to be perfectly honest. We're all going through struggles. Rachel, if we wanted to find you online, where would be the best places to find you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the online side of things is fairly new to me as well. I've been historically more of an offline business owner, so I do have social media presence, but I've been terribly active. I'm on do we need to do those long titles anymore? I'm on thebroadroom.co.uk, and then the legal side of my business is Serenwood. Seren is star in Welsh because I've got a Welsh background. But yeah, I mean, I am available, and I'd particularly love to take questions from people who've listened into this. And we've covered quite a broad range of issues, haven't we? And I know more than anything that what's happened is that everybody is going through their own unique experience. Very few people are, although it's a shared pandemic experience, everybody's situation has been markedly different, and some people's businesses have thrived and some people's have closed, and everything in between. And you know, I hope we have managed to talk about that broad experience today. And I would love more than anything, if people were taking away anything, is just please be kind to each other, be empathetic, realize that we're in the same storm, but we're all riding along in different boats. Makes me very emotional saying that, but you know, there's been a very difficult social, economic impact for very many people, and we all need to take care of each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I totally get it. And I think we've got a similar ethos, really, in the way that we just want to help people. And so, you know, I fully get it. And I'd highly recommend speaking with Rachel, whatever size of business you are, because there's a lot of common sense coming out here. So it's really good to hear. So just to remind everyone, there's the Facebook group, the Coronavirus Yorkshire Business Support Group. We've got more live Q&As coming up next week. It's been brilliant having you here, Rachel. This is going to be available afterwards as well, so we'll share it. But it was on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And you've been an absolute delight, Rachel. Thank you so much for being involved.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
It's an absolute pleasure. And we'll say goodbye. We'll see you all soon. Take care.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Johnny Ross audio experience. Thanks so much for joining me. If you want to continue the conversation, head over to my website, fleek.marketing, or find me on LinkedIn. That's all for today. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, tag me in your social media posts, and please leave me a review on iTunes. It will make a huge difference for me. I will see you soon.